Close your eyes for a moment. Imagine you have found the one, the person who makes every ordinary Tuesday feel like the first day of summer, the person whose voice alone calms the storm inside you. You have chosen them. You have said yes. The invitations are in the mail. The flowers have been chosen. White roses, because he loves white roses. You are 3 days away from becoming his wife. Now, imagine that in the quiet of a Tuesday night, when he thinks you are asleep, you follow him downstairs. And what you find behind that locked door, what you see with your own trembling eyes, tears open the floor beneath everything you know. This is not a fairy tale. This is the story of Mara Voss and what happened 3 days before her wedding. Mara was 32 and had long since made peace with being alone. She had a good life, a small apartment above a bookshop in Prague, a job translating old manuscripts for the university, and a cat named Kafka who tolerated her company most mornings. She was not looking for love. She had looked for it before, and it had always looked back at her like a house with all the lights off. And then, on an unremarkable October evening, she spilled an entire glass of red wine onto a man's white shirt at a museum opening. His name was Elian Calder. He was tall, not the gym tall of modern men, but the tall of old paintings, like he had been sculpted in an era when height meant something noble. His eyes were a shade of grey that Mara would later describe as the colour of a winter sky, just before it decides to snow. And when she stammered her apologies, face burning red, he simply looked down at the ruined shirt, then back at her and smiled. "Red suits me," he said. "It always has." She would think about those words later, much later. They talked for 3 hours that night. He knew obscure things, the kind of things you only know if you have lived inside libraries for decades. He spoke about the Black Death, like he had watched it happen. He described Venice in the 1700s with a homesickness in his voice that she found strange and beautiful. She assumed he was an academic, a historian, maybe, someone who had simply read more than anyone else she had ever met. She did not find it strange when he ordered nothing to eat. Some people are just not hungry. She did not find it strange that his hands were cool to the touch. Prague in October is cold. She did not find it strange that he never once turned his face toward the bright gallery lights, always positioning himself just slightly in shadow. She just thought he was beautiful. And she was already half in love with him by the time she left. They dated for 8 months, and they were the most alive 8 months of Mara's life. Elian was attentive in the way that good men in old novels are attentive. Not performatively, not anxiously, but with a quiet certainty that she mattered. He left notes on her desk before she woke up. He remembered that she hated cinnamon in her coffee and loved it in her pastries. He learned the names of every character in every book she was currently translating and asked about them like they were mutual friends. But there were things, small things, the kind of things that only become significant in retrospect. He never visited before sundown. When she asked, he said he had light sensitivity, a medical condition, manageable, but inconvenient. She accepted it without question. She had a friend with lupus who avoided the sun. It was not so unusual. He never ate in front of her. In 8 months of dating, she had never once seen Elian Calder take a bite of food. She mentioned it once, gently, over dinner at a restaurant where his plate sat untouched. He smiled, that winter sky smile, and said he had eaten earlier, that his stomach was delicate, that he preferred to keep her company while she ate. She let it go. He slept during the day. She thought he simply worked strange hours. He was vague about his career, something to do with private acquisitions, estate management, old money. It sounded plausible enough. And there was the apartment, a townhouse in the old quarter, enormous and draped in a specific kind of darkness. Not neglected, but curated. Heavy curtains, no mirrors in the hallways, a basement door that was always locked. Family storage, he said once, when she reached for the handle. Old things. Nothing interesting. She believed him. She wanted to believe him. There is a difference, and she would learn it too late. He proposed on a Tuesday, not a grand gesture, no restaurant, no crowd, no down-on-one-knee performance. Just the two of them on the roof of his townhouse at midnight, the city glittering below like spilled jewelry, him reaching into his coat pocket and placing a ring in her palm. The ring was extraordinary. A dark ruby set in silver, intricately carved with symbols she did not recognize. "It is very old," he said. "It has been waiting for the right person for a very long time." She said yes before he finished the sentence. The wedding was planned for 6 weeks out. Small, private, no church, just a civil ceremony at his townhouse, followed by a dinner for their closest friends. Elian's guest list was short and notable. 6 names, all with old European surnames, all with that same quality of timeless elegance that Elian himself possessed. Mara's friend Dasha, loud, irreverent, deeply suspicious of men who were too handsome, flew in from Berlin and spent the first dinner studying Elian the way a customs agent studies a suspicious passport. "He's perfect," Dasha said afterward, in the kitchen, while Elian sat silently in the living room reading. "Like, disturbingly perfect." "Does he have a brother?" "He's an only child," Mara said. "Of course he is," Dasha muttered. 3 nights before the wedding, Mara could not sleep. It was not nerves, or not only nerves. It was something underneath the nerves, something older and more instinctual, a feeling she could not name that had been pressing at the edges of her consciousness for days, getting louder. She lay in bed listening to the townhouse breathe, the creak of old timber, the distant sound of the city, and beneath it, something else, a sound from downstairs, soft, rhythmic, like movement. She told herself it was Kafka, though Kafka was asleep at her feet. She told herself it was pipes. Old houses have old pipes, but the feeling would not stop. And Mara Voss had spent her whole life translating dead languages, finding meaning in things other people dismissed as noise. So she got up. The hallway was dark. The house was the kind of quiet that has weight to it. She moved toward the stairs, and at the bottom she could see it, a thin line of pale blue light beneath the basement door. The door that was always locked. It was open. Not open wide, just ajar, as if someone had forgotten or as if something had wanted her to see. She should have gone back upstairs. She knew that. She knows that now. She pushed the door open and went down. The basement was not storage. It was a room out of another century. Stone walls hung with maps. Not modern maps, but old ones, hand-drawn, some on vellum, some on materials she could not immediately identify. There were bookshelves from floor to ceiling, filled not with her university library's careful catalogued order, but with something older, denser, more urgent. And in the centre of the room, Elian. He stood with his back to her, entirely still, in a way that no living person is entirely still. No breath moving his shoulders, no restless shift of weight, just absolute, inhuman stillness. "Elian," she said. Her voice came out smaller than she intended. He turned. His eyes were wrong. They were the grey she knew, but lit from within, luminous, pale, like moonlight through ice. And his mouth that she had kissed 1,000 times, showed the edge of something sharp. On the table beside him, a deep glass filled with something dark and red that was not wine. The world did not tilt slowly. It dropped out from under her all at once. "Mara." His voice was exactly as she had always known it, low, careful, unhurried, as if this were a conversation he had prepared for. "What are you?" she whispered. He did not answer immediately. He set down the glass. He turned toward her fully, and in the pale blue light of that extraordinary underground room, she watched the face of the man she was going to marry become something ancient. "I am what I have always been," he said. "I simply did not know how to tell you." She did not run. She wanted to. Every nerve in her body screamed at her to run, but her legs would not obey her, and some quieter, stranger part of her, the part that had spent years decoding the hidden architecture of things, needed to understand. So she sat down on the stone steps, and he told her. His name was not always Elian Calder. He had been born in what is now Hungary in 1387, the son of a minor lord. He had been young when it happened, 22, in the middle of a war, on a night that history had not bothered to record. He had not chosen this. He had survived it. 600 years. He had watched empires rise and crumble. He had moved from city to city as faces grew familiar with his unchanging face. He had loved a handful of times across the centuries, always carefully, always knowing the cost, always losing them, eventually, to time. He had not intended to love her. He had not intended any of this. Then why? She asked. Her voice was steadier than she expected. Why propose? Why plan a wedding? Why? Because I could not imagine the alternative, he said. I have been alone for 200 years, Mara. And then I met you and the world. He paused, and she saw something ancient and exhausted move across his face. The world looked like something worth staying in again. She thought about the 8 months, the notes on her desk, the way he had learned the names of her manuscript characters, the ring that had been waiting for the right person for a very long time. What does this mean? She asked. For us? For the wedding? He looked at her for a long moment. That is entirely your decision, he said. It has always been your decision. Mara sat on those stone steps for a long time. She thought about her grandmother, who used to say that love is not a feeling. It is a series of choices, made over and over, in harder and harder circumstances. She thought about her work. All those centuries of human experience she had spent her career translating. All those lives and loves and losses reduced to ink on old pages. She thought about how she had felt, every single day for 8 months, like she was finally living in a story worth telling. She looked at Elian. He had not moved. He stood at a careful distance, watching her with those luminous grey eyes, giving her space, giving her silence, giving her, as he always had, exactly what she needed. Are you dangerous? She asked. I could be, he said honestly. I choose not to be. I have chosen not to be for a very long time. Could I trust you? You have trusted me for 8 months, he said. I have never given you cause to regret it. She thought about that. It was true. It was profoundly, uncomplicatedly true. She stood up. She walked across the stone floor. She stopped in front of him and looked up at that ancient, beautiful, impossible face. The wedding is in 3 days, she said. Something moved in his eyes. Relief, maybe. Or gratitude. Or the particular joy of someone who has stopped believing in miracles, discovering they were wrong. I know, he said softly. Then we have a lot to talk about, Mara said, starting with whether you actually need a church, or if that's a real issue. He laughed, and it was his laugh, exactly, the one she knew, warm and real and entirely human. A common misconception, he said. I will explain. She took his cool hand in both of hers, and in the pale blue light of that impossible basement, 3 days before her wedding, Mara Voss decided to choose. They were married on a Saturday evening, as the sun finished setting over Prague. The flowers were white roses, as planned. The guests were few and strange and beautiful. Dasha cried, even though she had promised herself she wouldn't, and spent the entire reception pretending it was allergies. And Mara Voss, who had spent her whole life translating the words of people long dead, said her vows to a man who had been alive when those words were first spoken. She said them clearly and without hesitation. He kissed her hand first, then her cheek, then, very carefully, very gently, her lips. And she was not afraid. She had decided not to be. Some loves are larger than the life you planned for. Some doors, once opened, lead somewhere worth going. And some secrets, the ones kept not out of cruelty, but out of fear, can be forgiven, if you choose to. And that is where we leave Mara and Elian tonight. But this story is far from over. What happens on the wedding night? What does Dasha find out? And what does she do about it? And what is the real secret behind that ring, the one that has been waiting for the right person for a very, very long time? If you want part 2, smash that like button and tell me in the comments. And subscribe so you do not miss it when it drops. Drop a comment telling me, would you still have married him? I read every single one. Until next time, stay curious, stay brave, and never be afraid of a good dark story.